Hey, today I'm really excited you can be here because we're going to be diving into secrets of relationship driven sales. Look, this is the key to success. If you're going to sell, there's a proper way to sell where you're really building a relationship, getting to know the person you're speaking with. And in doing so, that relationship you develop is what makes them want to do business with you and not feel like they're getting sold. But how do you do it the right way? Well, to decode that with us today is Nadia Brown. Now, Dr. Nadia is a sales strategist, consultant, trainer, and founder of the Doyenne Agency, a sales agency that works with business owners, companies, and corporations to multiply revenue and awaken the consistent closer within your sales team using the consistent sales method. Now, Nadia helps women learn to play the career game in business and to advance their careers and professions as well. Nadia, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Ty. I'm so excited to be here.
Did I pronounce the name of your agency correctly?
You did fabulous. Yes. Well done.
I like that. I was like, oh man, I think it's a big one. I messed up. So I'm glad that I asked. So listen, let me ask you, what do you think? What's the difference between selling in a relationship-based kind of selling versus what a lot of people do?
I think one of the key distinctions for me is you center the actual relationship. So obviously we're in sales and the goal is to close and get a new client. The focus though is on that relationship. And so you are paying attention to the cues. You are honoring people's buying process. So it may not be a yes today. There may be a follow-up. There may be, several follow-ups. And I think that that's part of where sometimes we fall short is when we are only so short-sighted, only focusing on this one conversation today, and whatever that outcome is kind of where we leave that relationship. And that's not always accurate.
So when you mentioned the way the way they respond, it sounds like how you worded it. I love it way better than anything I'm going to say. Probably one of the smartest things I've heard today. What do you mean by that? Like, does everybody have their own pattern or their own system that they go through to process information to be able to be sold or to buy?
Absolutely. And so when you're looking at your prospects, they have their buying process, right? And so they've already done their homework up front. They pretty much know what they want. They have it all figured out. They may ask you a few qualifying questions and, that's it. They're ready to go. And then you have others who they need to stew on it a little bit longer. And so they do have that conversation. They need to fill you out a little bit. They may need to sleep on it, literally sleep on it, especially when you start talking about your larger investments. And sometimes I feel as sales professionals, that's where we fall short because we're excited. We want to get the new client. We want the win. And we don't always honor that process.
Really interesting. Two things to that. One of my mentors taught us, there's two guys that I know, they go run for digital marketer. And these guys are both really, really high level. And one always complains to the other one when he's outsells him. He goes, so I listened in to see what he did. And he always says, hey, what do you know about us? Do you know us? Are you ready to go? And they're like, yeah, I'm ready to go right now. And he would just go sign him up. He goes, I'm trying to sell everybody from the beginning. And he's just asking people if they're ready or they need more info. And it's interesting because we actually adopted that here and it's super successful. Are you ready to go? Or do you want more info? What do you need right now? So really, really, really cool because I found that to be hyper effective when you do understand kind of where they are or where they are in their own buying process or how they do go through a buying process.
Mm-hmm. It does. It makes a huge difference. And that way it makes it easier for you. It makes it easier for them. They have a pleasant experience. Then when they're ready to go, they're ready to go.
Yeah. And then don't oversell it because I'm that guy. I'm the guy because I'm in sales. I don't walk into a car lot until I'm ready to buy the car. I don't want to waste anybody's time. The last thing I bought for $5,000, I told the guy, I said, I don't want to go through all this. If you're not going to put me through it, I don't want to. I'm ready to buy. I just want to know, can you send me the order form? Can we go? And he got that. And he said, yes. Then the rest of the people are let's get on a sales call and talk more. I don't want to talk more. Done, So it's very, very true. What do you do? How do you turn you deal with a lot of salespeople and help them? A lot of things that I think they deal with are insecurities, self-doubt. How do you turn around insecurities and self-doubt that salespeople normally have and naturally have into confidence?
I think the big thing is to just find your own style. And so when you're just getting into sales, you come with a lot of preconceived notions. You come with And we tend to overlook all of the pleasant experiences we've had as buyers, and we only focus on all the bad ones, right? When you come into sales and then you're like, I don't want to be the bad salesperson, which is nice. And you can't allow that to color your experience. And so what I encourage, especially newer salespeople, to do is think about how you want that buying process to go. How do you want to feel as a salesperson? But then how do you want the buyer to feel? And those are the things that you do throughout the process. So I love what you said. Are you ready to go? Great. If you need more information, great. And I get to honor that. And so no one feels oversold, because you can't talk yourself out of a sale if you're not paying attention to the cues. But also, you don't want to be overbearing or aggressive or whatever that description may be from a buyer's perspective, if you're also, again, not tuned into the cues.
How do you start from the beginning? I always wonder, like, how do you hire the right sales team, the right salespeople? Are you looking for people that have decades of experience, or can you take newbies and effectively train them to sell? Are there certain personality traits that you look for? Because turnover, especially at a sales level, is really costly. So how do you get it right the first time and hire the right salespeople?
I think one, you need to understand how your process works within your business. I see a lot of that happening, where people will hire a salesperson and then they'll switch the whole process. And it's like, that's not what you hired me to do. And now they change everything. So one, you want to be clear on your process. The other is hire based on value systems. I find that to be far better in alignment versus years of experience, because seasoned sales professionals often have their own baggage because they've seen it all, right? And so they built this callousness that has served them well over the years, which can or cannot be a good thing in your organization. And newer people sometimes don't have an experience. They also don't have in just, what's the word I'm looking for? And just being sometimes negative. And so I've seen that sometimes where people are just like, they're not going to buy. I've seen this all the time. And that's not always true. They haven't had the time to develop the bad habits. And so you get to groom them within your organization and your value system, and how you do sales within your company. And then also just making sure they may or may not need more time to come up to speed. So that's when understanding your buying cycles is also very important. So really understanding your business and then setting them up for success.
One of the best books I've read on sales is called Challenger Sales. I don't know if you ever read this book. Phenomenal book. It sounds like you have. And I like the idea of unique selling proposition, delivering unique value they don't get elsewhere as part of that process. But you mentioned sales process. Like, what do you see should be part of a well-executed, well thought out sales process?
That's a good question. I think, one is really understanding. And I like when I talk about relationship driven sales, how are you building your relationships and building upon that relationship throughout the entire sales process? How are you qualifying and sharing information with potential leads as they are coming into your pipeline? What are you doing even after maybe the initial conversation and they haven't said yes yet, to continue that conversation and make sure all those touch points are made? And so looking at your sales process in that way, I think sometimes we have such a small view of the sales process. And then honestly, even after the sale is made, you still get to build on that relationship, because most of us can work with our clients more than just one time. We can serve them in different ways or over multiple years. And so really looking at your sales process in its totality and really looking at those areas and all those different touch points to really deepen and strengthen that relationship.
What do you find through that process helps? Is it all those touch points? Can you do that's part of automation? Do you do so for example, throughout the process, if they don't have confidence, does it make sense to run Facebook ads or Google ads that are show testimonial stuff like that? Or do I deliver emails? Or do you recommend that you do that and, call and do some things? I mean, with those touch points, how do you think it's best to execute those touch points after that initial conversation to make sure that the relationship continues to develop?
I like a mix. So I don't think there's a one size fits all. So I like to mix it up, whether it's the Facebook ads, definitely email automations. Like that's one of the easiest ways these days to definitely maintain some sort of relationship. But then I also like to take it offline, where we may send a postcard or gift in the mail, depending on where we are in that relationship or who we're talking to. I think sometimes it also just shakes things up, because it now is that cognitive dissonance where I was not expecting that from an online company to actually receive something in my mailbox. And so I think, it depends on your offer, but then also, again, when you think about how you want clients to feel and what you want that overall experience to look like, to start to be creative and maybe do something unexpected in order to continue to build on that relationship.
Why do you think that relationship selling is so much more effective than what so many others kind of do? Because like Jordan Belfort, like Wolf of Wall Street, he's got a system out there called Straight Line, and it's all about boxing people in. And we tried that, and everybody refunds, right? Like you could sell and close just about anybody when you take out all the reasons that they can't buy, but then they just feel pressured, they refund. So like, why do you think that relationship selling is so much better than these other methodologies that's out there?
I think, one of the things that we hear a lot, but we don't always honor it in our process, is really looking at that know, like, and trust factor. When you know someone, like if I feel like you're my friend, really, or we have a relationship, I'm less likely to refund because we have this relationship. I'm more likely to pay attention to my defaults because I don't want to ruin a relationship. And I've seen that where we've been in the buying or the sales process and someone is like, I'm concerned about this investment. I want to work with the team or I want to enroll in this program or whatever the case may be. But I want to make sure that I don't damage the relationship if for whatever reason there's an issue. And that's the type of relationship you want to build because it works twofold. There's that level of trust, but also there's that level of respect by the buyer that if I were to get in some type of trouble, I don't want to damage this relationship tie. Like I still want us to feel like we're good. And so that is why it's so important, because when I don't have that connection, it's like, when you order from a big box store, you don't have that connection and you're like, you know what? I don't want to do Netflix anymore. We're just going to cancel. I just go online, hit the unsubscribe or cancel my subscription and I'm out, versus someone where I have a relationship. And so I think that's why it deepens that connection for real.
What do you think happens in the initial calls to really get down the right path of actually not selling, but really building a relationship?
I think it goes back to something you mentioned earlier, is asking questions. So I teach, especially our newer salespeople, just get to create a sales conversation and go into that sales conversation, not so focused. Like we're going to get to the enrollment piece of it, right? But go in really wanting to understand this person, getting to understand what makes them tick. Why are they interested in this particular offer? How does it contribute to their bigger dream or their bigger vision or their bigger goals? Like take a moment to go a little bit deeper instead of going straight in. Obviously, for those that are ready, then you don't have to do that. But we talk to some people that are still new. They may have seen an ad. They're kind of going through the process. They don't yet know us that well. And so go into that conversation with the expectation that I may need to do some connection first before we go straight into let's get you enrolled.
You mentioned earlier that you kind of believe in not a one size fits all model, but using email, using social media. So what do you do when you're part of a sales process? Like, what do you recommend on how to best practices to use social media to help further develop that relationship?
That's a great question. I think not everyone's people are everywhere in terms of, depending on what platforms you're using. So some people have Facebook groups, some people don't, so if you have a Facebook group, you can obviously leverage that relationship and go deeper there and leverage, going live or sharing different resources or providing different things. I also think it's important that the type of information you're sharing. So if I'm not yet a buyer, then retargeting is great so that I continue to see this and you keep it before me and remind me, oh yeah, I forgot I was interested in that. Let me go back. I think leveraging that type of technology is definitely to your benefit. And then really understanding, I think the other thing too I want to add is give yourself time to really understand how social media works for you. Because again, it's not one size fits all. There's a lot of things changing in the social media world. And so you have to understand how that best works for your business. And I think sometimes, okay, maybe it's just Nadia that is very impatient. And so I'm just like, I want this to work.
It's not just
now.
you. I assure you that. Add me to that too. See, Nadia
now.
and Ty, yeah.
Yes. So it's like, okay, Nadia, give yourself a little bit more time to really understand what's working, what's not working, what you need to tweak until you get it refined to where you're starting to see the results that you want to see.
So what do you think about closing? That's something I find it's interesting because a lot of people don't ever ask for the sale. So I'm sure you see a lot of that in sales training and you're like violently shaking your head. You're like, yes, I know that. So what do you do? How do you fix that? 'Cause I think it's a courage issue. Like how does somebody, you give them the courage to even get to that step before we start about tactic to start asking for the sale?
I want to practice just saying it out loud and then ask. I think the other thing along that is practice then having actual conversations with people. Because you learn. That was how I learned. It was just having conversation after conversation, screwing it up, like, oh my God, I'd never say that again. And then also, how you phrase it. And so you set it up and then you're just like, the investment for this program is whatever. And then I always say silence, just stop talking, because that's when your nerves really kick in. We're talking about a courage issue. I just said the investment for this program is $30,000 and now I want to wet my pants. And so it's like, just stop talking and let that person respond. And so that's how I help people get to that point. But you have to say it. You have to ask. If you don't ask, then you guys are just hanging out. It's not a sales conversation.
Yeah. Do you have ways like techniques or tactics to segue into that, that closing portion where you're actually asking for money?
Yeah. So I would tell people, after you're asking the questions and you kind of have that information, that background, obviously it's going to be longer, shorter, depending on who you're talking to. And then you just transition into, here are my recommendations. I find that a lot of people can roll with that in terms of here's what I recommend based on what you shared. And then as you're covering that, this is how it's going to help you solve XYZ problem. Here's how it's going to contribute to your big vision. Here's how it works. So you get into all the features of it, and the investment is, and there you go.
When you present price, do you think it's good to like present options, one pay, multiple payments, or do you think it's best just to hit them between the eyes? Like if you're selling something 30 grand, do you say 30 grand? Or then do you immediately say, or, you can go this option, you can finance it over this? I mean, do you think it's like more of a menu selling where they have options to choose from? Or is it just like you hit them between the eyes, between the price, and then see how they respond to determine if you're going to offer, payments, et cetera, et cetera?
I think it's a matter of preference. So I've done both. I sometimes like to just say the price, like it's 30,000, because if someone comes back and they say, well, can I make payments? That's a nice signal that we're okay. Now we're cooking. Or sometimes I just lay out the options. Here's your option. If it's, one or two options that I may say you can do, either a one-time payment of 30,000 or 12 payments of 3,000, like it's your option, which one works best for you. So I think, it's a matter of preference and your comfort level and how you want to position it.
What about negotiating? Like, how do you deal with that? I read a great book called Never Split the Difference. I don't know if you ever read that.
I have that book.
I love that. That's a good book. Chris Voss. That guy's awesome. But I love his strategy, but it makes you wonder, like when somebody comes and tries to negotiate with you on price, how do you perceive that? First of all, is it that you didn't do a good enough job of relaying the value of the product, or that they didn't get the value? I mean, how do you look at that when somebody comes in and wants to start negotiating?
Yeah, I think before my default was, okay, clearly I didn't do a great enough job of it displaying the value, because now we're here in this place. Like, how do we get there? That was always my default. But now I think sometimes I'm also just like, is that just their personality? Because I also feel like some buyers feel like they haven't done their due diligence if they don't at least throw it out there. And so I don't take it as much as a slight against my skills or what I did well, but typically I'm like, oh my gosh, where did I go wrong? How did I not communicate this? Why are we here? And so then I just ask more probing questions to kind of get to the heart of why are we even having that discussion around negotiating.
What kind of probing questions, out of curiosity?
Well, I would, like what parts aren't clear. Sometimes I've run into cases where people may want to negotiate because they see a larger program and they're like, they now want to cherry pick. Well, what if I don't need this, but I need that? And some programs are structured where that's actually a fair conversation, where that's a possibility, and other programs aren't structured that way. And so it's like, well, tell me more about why you're feeling like that isn't applicable to where you are. Because obviously, we need some more discussion around that.
How do you get to somebody's root objections? Okay. Like, I'm a rare bird. I'll tell people exactly. And some people get upset because I'm like, hey, this is why I'm not buying. Like, here's clearly my problem. And I'm astonished at how many salespeople are taken back by that. They can't even respond when somebody comes to them directly and says, and I'll even refer to it. Here is my objection. This is what's holding me back. So I'm a sales guy, so I just want to be direct, say this all the time. Mm-hmm. But most people aren't like that. Most people are kind of afraid to even mention what the real objection is. So what kind of techniques do you teach to be able to get to somebody's real root objections?
I teach, taking that initial objection, which is typically the investment or time. Like, those are probably some of the top two, and taking that aside. So we were to take the investment aside and let's talk about any other questions. So I typically will phrase it either questions or concerns. Do you have, or is there anything that isn't clear? And let's go a little bit deeper there. And then we start to kind of do some more probing questions. But you're right, it's very rare that someone is very direct in their objections. And I think we've just been trained to not take that first thing. So that's why people, when you're like, here's my objection, you're like, whoa, what just happened? Like, that's not the norm, because most people are indirect. They don't want to hurt your feelings. They don't want to, whatever is going through their mind at that time, and as to why they're not direct. Another thing I'll do, Ty, sometimes is I'll just tell people, like, you can be honest with me, like almost giving them permission, just be straight. Like, we don't have to play these games. I get, you've probably seen that before with other sales professionals. Just give it to me straight. I'm a big girl. I can take it. You won't hurt my feelings. And a lot of times that helps set the stage too, where people are like, all right, here we go. Here's where I am. And that helps too.
So if you're meeting with the new client and they're having problems making sales, where do you even begin to start to understand what the problems may be?
If they have previously recorded sales conversations, I'll ask to listen to those. But a lot of times I just start with a conversation around, tell me what's going on. Like, what's the process? Is it you're not having enough sales conversations? Is it you feel like you're talking to the wrong people? Like, kind of almost doing like some sort of diagnostic to just kind of get a feel of where in that sales process things are not where they need them to be, because it's usually more than just one thing.
Do you think like having individual goals or accountability per sales rep is important?
I do. I think that each person, one, comes with different strengths, but then they also are motivated by different things. And so if you're looking at your overall sales team, setting those individual goals to really help them stretch and grow, but then also looking at, how they're motivated and what keeps them excited. Because I know that, typically everyone's like, all sales professionals are motivated by money and commissions. However, there are some that's not necessarily their biggest motivation. It's our job to get to the root of that and really understand it.
Yeah, and I figured that out with team members too. I'm astonished. I'm like, what? They're not motivated by money, but it's time off. It's like all different kinds of interesting things. It's really kind of weird when you ask people about how they're demotivated by so many different things, and we just assume that it's something else.
Yep. We just put all sales professionals in one bucket. They're all motivated by money. So let's just throw more money at them. And then you have that one person who's like, nope, I'd rather have more time off. And you're like, what planet are you from?
Yeah. What are you talking about? Well, speaking of which, like, how do you pay salespeople? What kind of structure there do you recommend?
I think it depends on your business, but I like to, I typically like to start with base plus commission. And then depending on how it's structured and, percentages and all that kind of good stuff, then you can look at your bonuses if you take away the base, because now they're able to really survive on commissions. But I think everyone kind of needs a little bit of runway to get up to that point.
What about rapport building? Back to the beginning of part of this. I mean, how do you think of some of the most effective ways in relationship-based selling to build rapport? Is it, talking about mutual interest? Hey, you like fishing? I like fishing. or is it like to just stay focused on what their goal is? Or like, how do you think it's the most effective ways to build rapport?
I like to build in some of the personal stuff. I think it's also obviously based on that person's personality. Um, and if there's a way that I can get information about them before going in, so we have a kind of a mutual starting point, so it's
Right.
not coming in cold, because I'm naturally an introvert. So small talk and just not having that makes me really feel awkward. So if there's some sort of form they fill out, so at least have something to start with, and I
Sure.
can,
Yeah.
say, okay, well, Ty, I see you started here, and then so it doesn't feel like I'm just going right in. But then obviously some people are definitely a lot more focused on the business at hand, and others are like, oh, let's talk about other things, the weather, or like us when we first started talking, we didn't realize we both graduated from the same college. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting. Immediately, like rapport is built there in that situation. So that's why I was wondering. I was wanted to ask. That's not why, but that makes me curious of like how much research you think it makes sense. I guess it depends on the level of selling you're doing. Like selling something for 30 grand is different than selling something for $30. Of what
Exactly.
level of research you do into that prospect before you get on the phone with them.
And the
But
environment that you're selling in. So I know like sometimes we support live events and we're having those sales conversations. So that's a little different than when you just have someone that's in your regular sales process and they set up maybe a strategy session or a discovery call. And so I think, you just look at your overall process, but however you do it, because even at the events, we still will attempt to create some sort of way where we have pre-event calls, and we're just really, it's all about rapport building. It's just to be able to build rapport with people, the people in the room, the people at the event. So when the offer is made from the stage, now you have some sort of rapport with that person. And when you go back and say, hey, are you interested? What do you think? Do you think this is the next best step, or however you position that conversation?
yeah, that makes a ton of sense, because I think obviously the more information you have and understand their wants and needs, their motivators, the better you are to sell. Which, how do you get to that? I mean, do you ask? Like, I've heard so many tactics and techniques. Like my mentor says, "This why," or "Tell me more." And he uses the example of a doctor where you go and you say, "Hey, doctor says, what's wrong?" And you say, "It's these three symptoms." And he's like, and you're like, "Well, and I've got these three things." And before you know, like you're spilling your heart out about all these things just by asking and why questions. So like that kind of stuff. Like what do you teach to really drill down to get somebody's to their root motivator?
Tell me more about that. How long has that been going on? What have been some of the things you tried in the past, and what were the results of that? Like really taking a moment to pause and do some more analysis. I recently joined a gym again after the cooties. It was like, okay, Nadia, it's time to get back out there. And they had me sit down. I was like, I think I like the sales process, but they had me sit down with a trainer in order to finish my registration, because I did it online. And they walked me through all the new and improved things they've done. And then they kind of did that whole baseline thing. But what I liked about it was it showed me, like, he didn't have to convince me. It was clear to me my areas of deficiency. And then again, asking those questions around what are your goals and some of the things that you've seen or experienced. And it was just like, okay, I get it. Let's do this, let's make it happen. And I think when we build that into our sales processes, where we help the prospects see it for themselves, so through assessments or asking those more probing questions, they then see their own gaps, and we don't have to try to tell them that they're there. They then acknowledge them, and then we get to create a solution on how we're going to fix them together.
Great talk. There's a million things I could ask you. I love your insight. I love relationship based selling. I love your expertise in this space.
Thank
Everybody
you.
that's watching and listening today, where can they go to be able to learn more, get more information?
You can visit our website at thedoyenneagency.com. We also have a complimentary quiz, discoveryoursalesblindspot.com, that'll give you more about your sales persona and some of the blind spots associated with that particular persona.
Do you say that's discovering?
Discoveryoursalesblindspot.com.
Sales blind spot. Okay, cool. I'll add that to the show resources. Thanks so much for coming on with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, so listen, if you're watching this, this is one of the most important things you could do. And I say this oftentimes. I say, if you can only sell and market, you could take away every single thing I have and I'll build it back within a year. And then some. I mean, those are the most important skills I think you ever need in business. And when you grow a business, there's a lot of skills you have to obtain. But if you only ever knew how to get leads and convert those leads, there's only two things you ever knew, the fundamentals of, you can succeed just about any business. I mean, so this is one of the core, if not the most essential skill sets you have to develop, you have to understand. And the better you understand it, the better a lot of things happen. Your sales cycle shortens, right? You close a higher percentage, your lifetime value, your return on investment all goes up. And it just gives you the ability to make more doing less if you understand the fundamentals. So if you want to understand the fundamentals and excel in this, there's really two actions you should take. First of all, take this quiz. I mean, it's a no-brainer. It kind of helps you understand what you're missing, where your problems are, and know what to fix. And that's at discoveryoursalesblindspot.com. That's discoveryoursalesblindspot.com. Free quiz, take the quiz, and that will help you understand where your blind spot is and what to fix. You also want to go directly to Nadia's website. I love it. And what I like most here is the blog, because the blog has a lot of really good information that will help you dive in depth into all these problems you could potentially be facing or already are in your sales world and exactly how to fix them. Now, there's a ton of resources here, but the blog you got to check out. It's one of my favorite aspects here, and you can get that at their website, which is thedoyenneagency.com. And I'm going to spell that. It's the word the, T-H-E, and then it's Doyenne, D-O-Y-E-N-N-E, agency.com. And so if you go to those two sites, you can find out where your blind spot is. You can get all kinds of training on it, being able to excel in this area of sales for you and your team. And again, radically increase the lifetime value, shorten the actual sales cycle, and just make more per your customers and help them legitimately relate to them, build a relationship where they don't want to leave you, where they don't want a refund, where they want to stay with you. That's what brings you more referrals. That's what helps you retain customers. It's not just about sales. It's about, getting the greatest value and providing the greatest value to the customers that you serve. So make sure you take the quiz at discoveryoursalesblindspot.com. Make sure you check out the resources at thedoyenneagency.com. Both of those are on the show resources page. Thanks for tuning in.